have 10 this year. I'm Palo Alto Weekly editor, Jocelyn Dong, and joining me for the co-moderation is Weekly City Hall reporter, Janati Shaner. Janati, you wanna, yeah. We're pleased to be presenting this debate in conjunction with three outstanding community organizations, the Palo Alto Chamber of Commerce, the Palo Alto Chinese Parents Club, and Avenidas. So thanks for joining us in partnership tonight. The mission of the Palo Alto Weekly is to provide accurate and reliable information to the community so that you can make up your minds about the issues that impact your lives. This debate is no different. It is presented so that you can understand the perspectives of our 10 candidates, and if we're successful, how they differ from one another. Before we welcome them to speak, let me tell you how this debate is structured. First, all 10 candidates will introduce themselves, but instead of the traditional opening statements, we've asked them to answer one of three possible questions that we gave them in advance. We hope these questions will reveal the qualities that they believe to be important in a council member, or the qualities that they have that they feel best qualifies them for the position. After those statements, we will invite 5 candidates to talk with Janati and me about 4 separate topics. So we're using the small group format so that you as voters can focus on 5 people at a time instead of 10 and really understand what each one is about. After half an hour with the first 5, we'll bring in the second 5, who will then answer slightly different questions but about the same topics so that you can compare and contrast. The final 40 minutes or so will be spent in a quick fire round as all 10 candidates answer some of the wide-ranging questions that our readers have submitted to us over the past several weeks. Unfortunately, we will not be taking additional questions tonight. Candidates will be time limited in their responses, and a timer will be shown on the screen. So one note from our tech guru, also known as Bill Johnson. Those of you in the audience should now have on your screen a large window with a timer and a smaller window of me. Please make the timer smaller if you wish by placing your cursor where the 2 windows meet and dragging the timer window to the left. I'm told that this will simultaneously enlarge the speaker window. So without further ado, we're going to welcome our candidates. We thank them so much for being here. The first candidate is Planning and Transportation Commission Chair, Carrie Templeton, who will be followed by Ajit Varma. Carrie, you have 45 seconds for the first question.
Thank you so much, and thank you for hosting us tonight. The question I wanted to answer was about the demeanor and style which a current council member has that I really respect and admire. So I would like to speak about Allison Cormack. She has a positive, professional, and practical approach, which I really admire. She's also really respectful when she engages with other council members and with the community and with staff. And I often find that she's exceptionally prepared in reading through the material, having excellent notes and questions prepared for staff. So that's one thing I'd really like to be able to do on City Council. Thank you.
I think you're muted.
Next up will be, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Next up will be Tech Product Director Ajit Varma, who will be followed by Pat Burt.
So the question I would like to answer is, what personal quality or characteristic do you believe makes you more likely to be successful on City Council, and what is your definition of success? So for me, I am very adaptable. I think adaptability is really important because the issues that we'll see are not the issues that we saw in the past. If 2020 taught us anything, there's lots of stuff that could happen and will happen. So to me, I want to make sure that I listen to people, look at the latest information, do the research, and make the right viewpoint. To me, success, one thing I look at it is Bill Walsh, who is a coach of the Stanford and 49ers, wrote this book called The Score Takes Care of Itself. So to me, that means we need to make the right decisions. If we make the right decisions and we have good ideas, then we'll all be successful in Palo Alto.
Thank you, Ajit. Next up is Tech CEO and former councilman, Pat Burt, who will be followed by Rebecca Eisenberg.
Thank you. The question I want to address is where I worked with people who disagreed with positions I had at the outset of a process. And over 20 years ago, I was one of the members of the State Comparative Risk Project that had the challenge to attempt to rank and prioritize all environmental and health and safety risks in the state of California. This was a diverse group of large and small business, energy folks, and social equity and environmentalists and health and safety. We struggled through this, and in the end, we arrived at a consensus that was unanticipated and was enduring. And that's the sort of process I believe in for Palo Alto as well.
All right, that was Pat Burt. Attorney Rebecca Eisenberg, who will be followed by Lydia Koo.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm going to answer the question, give an experience where you worked with people with whom you disagreed to arrive at a mutually acceptable solution. Well, as a transactional lawyer for 30 years, that question is my job description. I'm very proud of my success as a negotiator, which is actually reaching mutually acceptable resolutions with people with whom you disagree with. One example that I'm particularly proud of that influences me even today happened several years back. When I was taking PayPal public, I worked with the board and the underwriters to make sure that our 500 operations service providers in Omaha received stock option grants, even though at the time it was not standard. And I'm proud of that.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Next up is Realtor and Councilwoman Lydia Koo, who will be followed by Ed Lowing.
Thank you. The question I'd like to answer is which current council member I'd like to emulate. I would choose Vice Mayor Tom Du Bois. He has a tone that conveys we are a deliberative body, not pushing one particular perspective. Staff and consultants dominate the presentations. Residents get only 2 or 3 minutes to speak their part. Tom displays to residents their comments are heard and are part of the deliberations. Tom is willing to stand up for his positions and not go along to get along. He contributes a lot to the integrity of the discussion, asks good questions of staff, consultants, council colleagues, and the general public. Tom cares about people and is fair, ethical, and is innately a humble person, and his actions show this. He remembers he represents the residents and makes decisions to keep Palo Alto an attractive place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Next up is Executive Recruiter and Planning and Transportation Commissioner Ed Lowing, who will be followed by Stephen Lee.
Thanks very much. The question I'm going to speak to is the personal quality or characteristic that makes me more likely to be successful on council compared to other candidates, and what my definition of success is. All these questions are terrific because it's only crucial in predicting if this council is going to be able to get stuff done. Colleagues I work with trust me. They value my thoughtful and strategic and really open-minded approach on every issue. I'm recognized by them for maintaining focus and keeping the debate on track. And I participate in the debate respectfully. Solid reasoning, good judgment. I work to close the gap on polarized disputes with kind of a steady, no drama demeanor. Success is getting to the finish line respectfully and productively with a good outcome for residents. And my 10-year commission record bears out this success. It's the reason I'm endorsed by so many commissioners from both commissions I've been on, and why I'm the only candidate endorsed by 3 continuing council members.
All right, that was Ed Lowing. Next up, we have Corporate Attorney and former Human Relations Commissioner Stephen Lee, who will be followed by Raven Malone.
I'll be answering the question about working with people you disagree with. On the Human Relations Commission, one of our priorities was gender equity. The 7 of us, however, had different ideas and different approaches for how we wanted to work on it, and that included myself and my gender equity co-chair. Instead of giving up or agreeing to disagree, she and I put in the time, a lot of time. Together, we talked over coffee probably about a dozen times to go over the reasons and the specifics behind my proposal. We each had very strong convictions, but we put in the time to listen and work with each other. I tried to meet her where she was at, and she tried to meet me where I was at. Each of us compromised where we could, and each of us stood firm on the elements most important to us. What resulted was a better proposal that we could each proudly put our name to. And the commission voted unanimously to support that proposal, which is currently pending before the City Council.
All right, you just heard from Stephen Lee. Next up is Electrical Engineer Raven Malone, followed by Greer Stone.
Hi, thank you. I'll be answering the question about what personal quality or characteristic makes me more likely to be successful as a member of City Council, and what's my definition of success. So what makes me a good council member is that I truly care about people and making sure that we can collectively arrive at a solution that works for everyone. I've done this many times in my job as a systems engineer, and I believe that my ability to collaborate with a variety of people will serve me well on council. It's important to work with other council members and community members in order to make good decisions while keeping in mind the people who will be affected by those decisions. And my definition of success is creating a city where everyone feels welcome, safe, and can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Raven. High school teacher and County Human Rights Commissioner Greer Stone is up, followed by Greg Tanaka.
Good evening. The characteristics I believe will make me a successful council member is my empathy and my proven experience in collaborating with my peers. I know this community. My wife and I are both teachers and renters. We understand the difficulty in affording to live here. I know our community's youth as a teacher who has taught at JLS and currently teaches at both Palo and Gunn. As chair of the city's largest residents association, I understand the frustration of our residents who feel that our voices do not matter in city government. And as the vice chair of the Santa Clara County Human Rights Commission and former chair of the Palo Alto Human Relations Commission, I know the pain of our community's most vulnerable members as I have advocated for their well-being for the past 8 years. And finally, I empathize with all of you and the Zoom fatigue we are all feeling these days. So thanks for showing up tonight and giving me the opportunity to earn your vote.
All right, thanks, Greer. Last up of our 10, entrepreneur and city councilman, Greg Tanaka.
I've been told by many that I'm an exceptional listener. Some voters will decide which candidate to vote for based on one issue alone. But if you look at the diversity of topics and issues that the council will have to deal with, especially over 4 years, no one can be an expert on every topic. It's impossible. Being able to gather information and understand the different perspectives is crucial to good decision making, given the breadth and diversity of issues. That's why I've held office hours every Sunday afternoon since being elected. I listen to all sides, even to people that disagree with me. In fact, I seek to hear opposing opinions. This allows me to make better decisions for the public. My definition of success is the greatest benefit for the most number of people.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to move to our small group time. The first grouping will be Rebecca Eisenberg, Lydia Koo, Ed Lowing, Stephen Lee, and Ajit Varma. In this section, each response will be time limited to 60 seconds. So we'll get those 5 together, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Janati, who has the first section of questions.
Great. Thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you, candidates, and thank you, roughly 500 participants in this panel debate. We're going to start with housing, big topic, as anybody who's seen this week's council meeting knows. And the first question on housing, we're going to start with Rebecca Eisenberg and then go to the other 4 candidates in this group. What trade-offs in zoning or building requirements would you support in order to attract higher density, affordable housing development? Specifically, under what circumstances would you support raising the height limit, reducing parking requirements, and waiving ground floor retail protection? Thank you. So Rebecca, take it away.
Okay, so that's a big question. So first of all, I want to say that as a general matter, I oppose exclusionary zoning. I believe that a lot of the zoning in Palo Alto is exclusionary. I actually was a fan of SB 1120 because it it didn't ban single family, RH1 lots. Rather, it put control in the power of the homeowner, especially maybe a homeowner who just has been laid off or having trouble making the mortgage, to actually be able to stay in the community by duplexing their home or dividing once their lot into 2 pieces so they can stay with us. I believe in height limits, not height limits. I actually believe in letting go of a lot of height limits in appropriate places, because when you allow a building to go higher, you can reclaim more of our natural environment for the community to share. I much prefer taller buildings than low and large buildings that take up our beautiful green space, for individuals rather than share it with others. That's some of the answers.
Thank you. And I should have mentioned who the next candidate is going to be Lydia Koo, followed by Ed Lowing. And I'm going to read the question again to give Lydia a few seconds because I didn't say her name earlier. But what trade-offs in zoning or building requirements would you support in order to attract higher density affordable housing development? Specifically, under what circumstances would you support raising the height limit, reducing parking requirements, and waiving ground floor retail restrictions? So, Councilwoman Koo, go for it.
Thank you. So firstly, I want to say we should not deceive ourselves by using the euphemism incentives when we're talking about subsidies. In general, subsidies are bad because they produce economic dislocations and are often unsustainable. If we use subsidy to a developer for a building, that lowers the cost of the project, increases the return on investment, making the underlying land more valuable and costs more, which is pitched as requiring even larger subsidies and on and on. A prominent local realtor advised his clients they could expect an average of 39% profit on newly built speculation homes, the highest return among all cities. So I don't generally believe in subsidies, and it's a habit that the council needs to stop. However, I am open to considering subsidies when they benefit and are broadly supported by our community, especially when supported by residents that are living near the development receiving the subsidy. Any subsidy needs to serve the community, not just be an automatic expectation on part of the developer. And it has to be 100% affordable housing.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Koo. Next, we have Ed Lowing, and he'll be followed by Stephen Lee and then Ajit Varma. So, Mr. Lowing, take it away.
I consider affordable housing to be not only the top priority of my campaign in my first 4 years, and I don't consider it urgent anymore in Palo Alto. I consider it an emergency. And so when we have an emergency in our midst, we have to treat it differently. Now, we have worked on implementing the HIP program. We've worked on implementing HIP on steroids, and we're getting some bites on that. We also, so I say we worked on it on PTC. We also worked on adding CS zoning as a place to put more homes. And the issue that you're asking specifically is where we can make even more concessions. I think it has to be around large, fully affordable housing or 80% affordable housing. And that's where it makes sense to do that. What I would specifically like to propose tonight is that a standing committee of council, of 2 council members, have the responsibility to be the point people on this and report back to council quarterly. So there's absolute focus on this problem.
Thank you. And next we have Stephen Lee. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the question. For me, housing is so inextricably linked to many of the issues we care about as a community, whether it's racial and economic inequality, traffic, climate change, homelessness, declining enrollment in our schools. Our city's inaction on housing is having a negative impact on current residents. And so we need to get serious about housing because housing itself is a community benefit. I would be interested in reevaluating our parking and height requirements if it meant that we could build denser housing along transit corridors and near job centers. If we want to address any of these issues, we need to take a serious look at these things and make good choices as a local community before the state steps in and mandates housing in areas and in ways that we may not like as a community. So we need to get serious about housing because it intersects with all of the other issues we care about as a community. Thank you
very much. And last but not least, Mr. Varma.
Thank you. I have a lot of yeses for you. Yes to raising the height limit. Yes to changing parking requirements. Yes to ground floor retail. So we have all these in Palo Alto today, and they're not well planned and they're not well zoned. I think we have great areas like on El Camino, like on San Antonio Road, parts of Embarcadero Road, east of 101. We have great areas where we can create denser buildings. We see that currently with a lot of our parking restrictions, there's empty parking garages. And the reason I think these are all so important to say yes to is this is what makes it economically feasible for developers to create more housing. And for me, that's not just affordable housing, that is market rate housing. That's like space for all the needs of our community. And I think that a lot of times when we like hope for things to happen, we have to have more than just hope. We have to have a plan. And so these restrictions that we're so against, like I would just like say that when we look at ourselves and we look at our city, I think that we can make smart growth happen in the right areas. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll hand it off to Jocelyn for the next question.
All righty. So our next section is on police reform. And currently the police union contract provides, oh, I'm sorry. The order will be Lydia Koo, Ed Lowing, Stephen Lee, Ajit Varma, and Rebecca Eisenberg. For some reason, Janati, I'm seeing you. Have you muted? You are, okay. So currently the police union contract provides for binding arbitration to resolve appeals of disciplinary actions, including terminations of police officers who've been found to have committed misconduct. But these arbitrations can prevent the removal of officers that a chief of police wants to replace. Would you favor or oppose repealing this provision as part of next year's contract negotiations? Why or why not? And Lydia, you are up first.
I would support that. I think at this point, you know, the contract, the memorandum the contract should be between, should be about pay, benefits, retirement, etc. In terms of the training, the discipline, etc., it should not be part of that contract. It should be left so that we as a city council and of course the independent police auditor can review and can make recommendations to council directly. This is, I think, part of the police reform that needs to be addressed, because oftentimes when a police officer is disciplined or perhaps even let go, oftentimes the arbitration and the arbitrator and the police union can bring them back, and that's not the way to address this issue.
Thank you, Lydia. Ed, same question, binding arbitration, would you repeal?
Yes, I do support that. The crux of the matter is, as Lydia just stated, is the unions. And as I've stated broadly in the campaign so far, that's a core problem. They need to come to the table as partners with us to fix these problems. It's to their benefit, it's to our benefit, it's to their officers' benefit, obviously, and it can have impacts, you know, across the region. So they need to come in with that sort of attitude. And the handcuffs, I use that word intentionally, that are on the police chief are just awful, so that he can't even take action at this point. So that's kind of where the highest leverage, I think, is to make drastic changes and to get rid of proven bad apples that we have in our barrel. So I think the focus should be on that. Excuse me. Good.
Thank you very much. Stephen Lee, is this the way to get rid of bad apples?
Yes, I think as elected officials, we really need to stand up and represent our entire community and oppose any provisions that would prevent us from the systemic change we certainly need. So I would not vote in favor of any contract that included binding arbitration or any provisions that limits our ability to remove or discipline police officers who do not meet our highest standards, or which prevents us from making the systemic changes we need in our police department. I also think we need to reimagine public safety in a more holistic approach, investing in community services, in social programs, and investing in low-income and minority communities as well.
Thank you very much. Ajit Varma, your take on binding arbitration?
Yes, so I would remove it. Clearly, I think if you look at the research and you look at a lot of the situations that we've seen over the last few months, a lot of the police officers had previous like violations or misdeeds in their service. And they, you know, had the situation where then after a few months after arbitration, then they were put back into the police force. I think that most of the police force and the police in Palo Alto are trying to do good for the community. So I think associating the bad with the good creates a lot of like negative problems. It makes people afraid of police. And it also sets a really bad reputation where if you look at past cases in Palo Alto where harm was done and police were put back into the police force and even promoted, it creates a bad reputation for the entire police force, and it detracts from a lot of good work that they're doing. So I think it's in the best interest of our community and the police force to remove the binding arbitration.
Thank you very much. Finally, Rebecca Eisenberg on the topic of police reform and binding arbitration.
So Palo Alto has a big problem right now with, maybe always, with police brutality against people of color, especially African Americans and Latinx individuals. This problem is historic, and this problem is in part arises from the Police Officers' Bill of Rights, which California and Wisconsin and Minnesota, two other states where we've seen significant abuse of power against people of color, all share. That Police Officers' Bill of Rights puts too much power in the hands of police officers and deprives it from our community. We need to do everything we can to change that, to make sure our community is safe for everyone, no matter their race, ethnicity, language, religion. And currently, our police department is abusing their power. So although I actually am a huge supporter of unions, from a union family, I'm endorsed by SEIU and the Bay Area, the South Bay Labor Council, I have significant issues with, right now, the wrongful use of power against people of color in Palo Alto.
Thank you. All right, for our next topic, handing it back to Gennady.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Our next category is council performance and oversight. And we're going to start with Ed Lowing here and then proceed to Stephen Lee, Ajit Varma, Rebecca Eisenberg, and then Lydia Koo. And the question is there currently a proper power balance between the city council and the administration? And if not, what changes would you advocate to create such a balance? So Mr. Lowing, the floor is yours.
Another perfect 1 minute question there. I think that the problem right now with council is because of some of the things that have happened, that they just don't have the public trust. And some of that comment comes out in that who's running the show. I think that there's some ways to fix that, and the ways to fix that are to just have them concentrate, identify, and focus on a few key priorities so that we get things done that need to be done. With good intentions, I think they're giving the city manager too many things to do. And so they aren't getting done. And those that are handed there without top priority status, the city manager sets the priorities. So that's the one problem that's interfering. The second one is that once they're there, they're not always being managed to make sure that the city manager or the planning director or whoever gets things over to the commissions to get it done. There have been a number of things that were voted on by council that what they're supposed to go to planning and transportation, and they never got to us. So the problem is setting priorities themselves and then managing what they have delegated.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lee.
Yeah, as elected officials, we should be setting the direction that our community is taking. But for far too long, there's been a culture on our council where there's just too much deference, too much power in the hands of our city staff and our city leadership staff. And I think that needs to change. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running. I actually agree with Pat Bird and Greg Tanaka on this issue. Council needs to reassert its power, reclaim its power, and work on behalf of the community. I've heard from many current and former council members that they don't even control their own agenda, whether it's at the council level or at the council committee level. That abdication of responsibility and power is totally unacceptable. How can we expect our local elected officials to do the people's work if they don't even control the agenda, if they don't even have the ability to get answers to their questions or have access to the information they need to make good decisions? So we need bold and progressive leaders who are going to step up, reclaim the power, and do the people's work.
Thank you very much. Next is Mr. Ajit Varma.
Thank you. So even in recent history, we've had situations like a curfew in Palo Alto, which I think makes no sense at all. It was called for by the city manager. And I think that these are decisions that just show that the city council hadn't been active in governing the city. City council is elected by the people of Palo Alto to represent the people of Palo Alto. So I think it's the obligation to make sure that the research is done, the work is done, to understand how to be informed about the issues. That's a lot more than just like setting the agenda. It's actually reading the packets. And I've seen a lot of the packets, and there's a lot of detail that's provided. And so becoming like educated, I think is critical. And then as it pertains to deciding, like I think that I've heard instances where, you know, whether meetings are canceled or there's not enough time. And I think that that might mean that it's a job that requires more time or more people. And I think it's important to make that commitment from anyone who's elected.
Great, thank you very much. Next, Ms. Eisenberg, go for it.
Hi. So the city manager reports to the city council, and it's the legal responsibility of the city council to manage the city manager. Although the city council always has had the legal obligation to manage the city manager, it has failed to do so. Management is a skill, and the Palo Alto City Council has lacked that skill for years, maybe decades. Time and time again, we hear the city council and some commissions complain that they are forced to reach a resolution because of the rules. Here's the thing, the city council makes the rules, and the city council is absolutely 100% free to change the rules. And in many cases, when we see the President Hotels residents be evicted illegally, and then we have a boutique expensive hotel, or when we see the high wealth people not having to follow the rules, that's because the city council has chosen not to do that. I will bring an antidote to that.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Councilwoman Koo.
Thank you. Our city charter tasks our city council with giving our city manager and staff clear directions. In my opinion, this has not happened for several years. Even with the hiring of our city manager and our city auditor, in the past, it has included residents on the panel during the interviews. In this case, it hasn't happened. However, I feel that as we go forward with the new council, there is an opportunity to sync that up so that we are actually giving more clear directives to the city manager. If a council can't do that at this point, especially with mayor in place who has the direct contact with the city manager, then we do have issues that they can't produce. I also think that the council majority frequently relegates important decisions to staff or department heads with little oversight or options for appeal. We have to remember the city is not SimCity, the computer game. What is built lasts 50 to 70 years, and we cannot just erase or reset it.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to hand this back to Jocelyn.
Thanks, Janati. Our last topic for this group is commercial impacts. We're going to start with Stephen Lee, go on to Ajit Varma, Rebecca Eisenberg, Lydia Koo, and Ed Lowing. The question is, should the approval of future commercial development projects be contingent on the developer building or funding housing for at least as many people as the project will employ? If so, how would that work? And if not, why not? So, Stephen Lee.
We have a 3-to-1 jobs to housing imbalance. You know, my default impression is that we have enough office in this town, and we really need to get serious about building more housing to mitigate that current imbalance. So my first preference, if you elect me and a strong pro-housing progressive majority, would be to focus on building housing, reducing barriers to building dense housing along transit corridors and in job centers, and not focusing really at all on office development. I think the conventional wisdom is that we need commercial development to fund or subsidize housing development, and I don't think that that's true. I think we need to look at how do we reduce the costs, how do we raise additional money through a business tax on larger, still profitable corporations in our town, and use some of that money to make housing development actually pencil out. So I'm not in favor of additional commercial development at this time until we get serious about addressing our housing needs.
Thank you, Stephen. Ajit Farmer, you're up. I believe you have a different viewpoint on that.
I do. So businesses are hurting. Businesses are fleeing Palo Alto. Small businesses are going under. If you walk on University Avenue, if you walk on California Avenue, you'll see tons of for lease signs. I don't think that we can make it hard, or should we make it hard to do business in Palo Alto. I think that we can definitely work with businesses. Every business is different. Some businesses like Google have lots of money and have committed to spending billions of dollars on housing in the Bay Area that I think we can definitely work with to encourage them to build office space in return for housing. But that's not true for small businesses. I think small businesses, like if they want to set up their dream and they have a dream to be in Palo Alto and they want to start their business here and they're a new business, I think that we should encourage that. We should admire that. We should make that possible. And so having them have these onerous restrictions on them will make them say, they don't want to be here. And to me, that's the wrong decision for Palo Alto.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, Rebecca Eisenberg. Housing built by commercial developers?
Okay. I was just kicked off. I'm back on. I think I know the question. It's about commercial developers and how to build housing. So my opinion is that in the past 10 years or so, our city council has relied on one strategy to build affordable housing. That has been relying on commercial developers to get there. We have seen, because this city council, the former city council, who are some of my opponents, the planning commissioners, have succeeded in giving permits to only 43 very low income housing units, when our legal goal is 700 and we have one more year to complete that. That is a success rate of 6%. That is a failure under any way that you measure the ABAG requirements, the RENA requirements. We have to switch from the strategy of relying on commercial developers. We need to acquire land, which we can do through bonds, commercial bonds, not residential bonds, which we can do taking advantage of the $1 billion of state money that our governor has made available that we haven't even applied for, which we can do by reclaiming unused land. We need to own this land. We need to stop relying on the wealthiest few to have acts of charity. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Lydia Koo, should commercial developers be required to fund or build housing commensurate with the number of employees they bring in?
Certainly, they need to pay their fair share. However, in the last few years, we have reduced the square footage for commercial development, especially with office and research and development. And given the COVID times, we also know that we want to encourage a lot of these businesses, especially in the tech and research and development, to telecommute. So we should be exploring that option. And with that, I think some of these office buildings, we could also look at transforming those perhaps into housing, some part of those. Now, on the small businesses, it has been actually very devastating to a lot of the small business owners. On that commercial end, I really believe the city needs to take a good look, engage a economic development specialist in order to look at what the community is willing to support and frequent, what types of community serving businesses we could have and attract to City of Palo Alto.
Thank you very much. Finally on this topic, Ed Lowing.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, your general question, first of all, was just kind of making sure that there were enough houses to take care of the jobs. And
right, not to exacerbate the imbalance.
Yeah, and a lot of people started talking about segments and kind of got off that. So I want to just say that, yes, I mean, by definition, but I don't think that it needs to be 51-49. No, I think that the problem is that our fraction is just out of whack right now. And I think that we have to, work on that fraction, which means we have to work on the bottom half of that fraction. So there could be, I wouldn't want to rule out the combination of office and getting some housing, but I don't think that has to be the primary way to do it by far. Also, the segmentation discussion is valid because helping a retailer or having a startup come into some space that's been vacated by Tesla is totally different than should we put up another 300,000 square foot of offices. Right now there's a glut and work at home is real. It's going to be real forever. So we need to take a pause on that and really work on the crucial aspect of affordable housing. So I don't agree with the approach that Mr. Varma wants to take on that.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of this first group of 5 candidates. Thank you so much, everyone, for your thoughtful comments. We're going to bring in the next 5. That would be Pat Burt, Raven Malone, Greer Stone, Greg Tanaka, and Carrie Templeton. Just like in the first round, you will have 60 seconds to answer each question. And again, we're going to start with Gennady on the question of housing.
Jocelyn, and thank you, the 5 candidates we just heard from. So on housing, we're going to start with Pat Burt, and then we're going to continue to Raven Malone, Greer Stone, Greg Tanaka, and Carrie Templeton. Other than accessory dwelling units, what, if any, changes to the limitations of the R1 zone would you support to encourage the addition of more housing in the city? And did you support Senate Bill 1120, which would have allowed homeowners to redevelop their lots with duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes? So Pat Burt, go for it.
Thanks. So we have not only initiated accessory dwelling units or ADUs that are separate external units up to, I think, 800 square feet, additional square footage on each lot in Palo Alto now, but we now are adding what's called a junior ADU, which allows people to carve out another unit within their home, not adding square footage. And we have waived the parking requirements to a great degree on that and streamlined permitting. So we don't truly have single family zoning in Palo Alto right now. I did not support SB 1120, which would allow, in addition to that, to subdivide every single lot and then build those 2 additional units. So 6 units on what is today 1 lot. We're seeing an 8-fold increase in the accessory dwelling units. And we've heard this description of single family zoning is now exclusionary housing zoning, and all zoning excludes to some degree, but it's been equated to segregation of our housing on a racial basis, and that's simply not the case. There's an economic segregation that exists today.
Thank you very much. Raven Malone, same question. Other than accessory dwelling units, what changes did you support to the R1 zone to encourage more housing? And what was your position on the SB 1120?
I fully support ending exclusionary zoning in general. I would like to see more duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes. I actually live in an accessory dwelling unit, and I feel like there should be more of them here. The state law allows a minimum of 1,200 square feet for ADUs, and I feel like we should take advantage of that, especially considering we're in the middle of a housing crisis. People need places to live. We have over 300 people in our city who are unhoused. I fully supported SB 1120. I was really upset that, it ran out of time. And we need to build more housing. I understand that there is a concern as far as people not wanting fourplexes next to their single family homes. I completely acknowledge that. Let's work together and let's find a place where we can make these units fit and make sense. But we need to bring housing to Palo Alto. It's critical. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Greer Stone, followed by Councilmember Greg Tanaka. Go for it, Greer.
Yeah, I'll echo what Pat Burt was saying. As far as single-family zoning in Palo Alto, we already have essentially eliminated that with the ability to have 2 ADUs on each single-family lot. I came out against 1120 just as I came out against SB 50. Both Pat Burt and I co-authored an op-ed against SB 50 over a year ago. on this issue, and really what my biggest concern about this kind of very blunt tool that Sacramento wants to use to just upzone our communities and strip us of local control is that really upzoning actually has proven to show that it leads to greater gentrification and it ends up making the land that the property sits on more valuable, which leads to higher housing prices. So for example, in Harlem, they upzoned Harlem back in the early 2000s. In a period of about 10 years, Harlem created 1,100 new market rate housing units. But during that time, rent increased by 58% compared to Manhattan at 16%. The population increased by 455%. But its Black population declined by 5%. Its Latino population declined by 13%, and its white population increased by 455%. So this is not the solution to our housing problem.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Tanaka, followed by Chair Templeton.
Well, we definitely have a lack of affordable housing in our city, and it's a problem that we need to address. I mean, this is why I supported teacher housing in the courthouse, Wilson Court, housing for developmentally disabled. And then really to get more housing, what we need is a more certain entitlement process. Right now, it's very Byzantine, it's uncertain, it's long, and also smaller units. Now, in particular for R1, I think one answer is looking at my neighbors. I live in College Terrace. I think most of you guys have been here. One thing that's unique about College Terrace is that we have this idea called village clusters. And it's actually something that we looked at when I was on the planning commission. And the idea behind village clusters is we have these really small units kind of clustered together where they share some of the common areas. And from the street, it looks very much like a regular kind of R1 type of housing. And what was interesting was I had an office hour from these recent Stanford grads, and they were all buddies in school, and they wanted to kind of have this cool housing arrangement. And so they're actually looking for more of this kind of arrangement. And I think it provides more affordable housing, and also provides a sense of community. Okay, anyways, I'm more time, but thank you.
Thank you very much. And Chair Templeton, last but not least, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You know, I think that in Palo Alto, what we're hearing from our community members is the tension between wanting more housing and not wanting to have the look of the neighborhoods change very much. And I think it's really interesting that we're talking about concepts that were proposed in Senate Bill 1120, like duplexes, for example. Duplexes will change the look of the neighborhood less than ADUs, right? They'll be constructed within the same structure. And the difference between a JADU and a duplex is really in name only. I would say that it's really controlling, using the city government to control the size of the unit in the house, whereas a duplex gives a little bit more flexibility to the homeowner. And I think it's a really interesting idea. I like that we're getting creative about this. It might be the right thing for Palo Alto. I'd love to have a little bit more public dialogue on it, but I'm open to that kind of creativity.
Thank you very much. I'll kick it back to Jocelyn for the next round.
All right, the next item that we want to talk about is police reform and specifically oversight. Love to hear the candidates' thoughts. We're going to start with Raven Malone, go on to Stone, Tanaka, Templeton, and Burt. So the question is, would you support or oppose the creation of a citizen oversight committee to review complaints, data on police stops, training and other practices, and then issue regular reports to the council? Why or why not? We'll start with Raven Malone.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Absolutely. One of the big problems that we have in our police department is transparency as well as accountability. And that would help with both of those in both areas. It's very hard to pull data from our police department, even if we request it. It's really hard to get our hands on. And, you know, that's really important so that we know what's going on in our community, because at the end of the day, we want to keep all of our community members safe, and we want to make sure that everyone feels welcome no matter what demographic they're in, no matter their race, no matter their financial background. It doesn't matter. We want everyone to feel safe, and that we can't ensure that if we don't know what's going on. And we've heard the complaints, we've seen the videos, we've seen the stories, and these are real incidences that have happened in the city, and yet these people are still on our force. These people have had promotions. This has to stop. So yes, I fully support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Stone.
This is an issue I strongly support, and sort of in a way I chair a similar body at the county level. I'm the chair of the Santa Clara County Justice Review Committee, and the work that we do is provide oversight for county law enforcement and our county's jails. And I'm currently serving on an ad hoc committee with the Human Rights Commission to propose meaningful police reform to the Board of Supervisors to be able to hopefully implement within our county jails and within our sheriff's department. One of the big things is transparency. You cannot have a democracy without it. I tell my students this all the time. And yet back in December, City Council voted to change the way in which internal complaints against police officers is handled. It now goes to the city's Human Resources Department, not to our independent auditor. That makes it so nearly impossible for us to be able to have that accountability that is so necessary to make sure we are rooting out police officers who are using racial slurs or ad hominem homophobic remarks and other issues of police misconduct.
Thank you, Greer. Greg Tanaka, do we need an oversight committee for transparency?
Thanks, Jocelyn. So first I'd like to start, I think overall, while there are some issues with some officers, I think overall we actually have some very good officers in our city. But even for me, I'm on city council. We had an incident about a year or so ago with a 911 call. I had to do a public records request to get data, and it shouldn't be like that. The data should be a lot more open, a lot easier to access. It shouldn't be like pulling teeth. So I think we need much better transparency. And the other thing I think, besides just better access to the data, is also comparison to other cities. So I'm on an ad hoc committee to compare our city against other cities, or to look at different type of public safety delivery models. And then we're trying to compare, like, is ours better than Sunnyvale's or better than the Cahoots program from Eugene, Oregon? It's really hard to know. So I think being part of a open data project that's going on at Stanford is actually really important. In terms of citizen oversight, I think that's one step. One idea I heard from my office hours actually is maybe the police chief should actually report into city council directly. And actually that happens in some city. So that's another possibility.
All right, thank you so much. Next, Carrie Templeton.
Yes, I agree with what Greg and Raven have said here. I think it's just unimaginable that we don't have the data about what's happening in our own police department available to us. You know, we are in the heart of Silicon Valley. We all understand on various levels the value of data, and really what's helpful with it is that we can understand trends and we can address those trends. If they're going in the right direction, we can continue things that we're doing that we feel are driving those improvements. If they're going in the wrong direction, we can take action to reset things to the right direction. So I do think it's really important to increase our transparency, especially having access to police data. And regarding the oversight committee, I think this is very important. We need to have members of our community involved in evaluating incidents that happen with the police. It's unacceptable that this is exclusively happening out of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. And finally, Pat Burt, do you see a role for an oversight committee and transparency?
Yes, I do. And I think the guiding principles are transparency, accountability, and equal justice. So we want to look at how we achieve each of those. And they're intertwined. So I think the best model is most likely to have something like we do have on the county level, and Greer mentioned, which is a subcommittee of our Human Relations Commission, which is established, has been taking a leadership role in looking at police reforms and accountability. I also think that there's a valuable function in that oversight committee in having data to actually help the police department improve themselves, not just come down on them. The overwhelming majority of our police officers are really wanting to be servants of the community. And they have a great reputation, the vast majority of them, and our department does, outside of our city. But we know we have problems. And I believe that many of the officers know we have problems. And we also need to bring back the proper role of the independent police officer, which was reversed in December.
All right, I appreciate all of your thoughts on that topic. Handing it back now to Gennady for council performance and oversight.
Yes, thank you, Jocelyn. Our next question, and we're going to start with Greer Stone here, and then go to Tanaka, Templeton, Burt, Malone, that order. Does the city council exercise adequate oversight of the city manager and publicly hold staff accountable for carrying out their policy directives? If not, how would you remedy the problem? Take it away, Greer.
Thanks, Gennady. No, I don't think they do. You know, one of my frustrations being chair of the Midtown Residents Association is the feeling that resident voices and the people of this town are not necessarily being heard and really transmitted into policy. I mean, if you look at really the hierarchy chart of city government, residents are on top, followed by city council, and then city council directs our city appointed officers and staff to fulfill those policies. And those policies are supposed to be the will of the voters. I mean, that is what elected representatives do. And oftentimes it feels like it's reversed, that city staff is the one really directing council and directing the direction of this city. And so I believe city council really needs to be able to regain control of that and be a voice for the people. And really that is why I'm running, is because I want to be able to represent your voices on city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tanaka.
So, thank you, Gennady, for the question. I certainly do on council, but I think a lot of my colleagues, there's not a strong willingness to confront staff on issues, not as much as I like. And I actually appreciate Stephen Lee's assertiveness on the HRC for that. So, like, for instance, I was the only one to vote against the city manager's house, even though we're in pretty bad budget times. The city manager is not elected. We are elected, and if we don't perform, we're just not elected again. And you know, what's kind of crazy is the city manager can put any agenda item he feels like on the agenda anytime he feels like it. But as elected officials, we have to get a majority on council, right? That means you have to get 4 people, and we have Brown Act restrictions. So it's actually quite difficult to do that because of how it's set up. And so I think that we need to be able to have much more oversight than we currently do, and exercise much more oversight. So for instance, we had a curfew that the city manager unilaterally asserted, which, you know, as council members, we weren't even consulted with. There's a lot more, but yeah, I think we need more control over this.
Thank you very much. Chair Templeton.
Thank you. Just to build off of what a couple people have said and what Greg just said, I think that it's not just do people make mistakes in staff. I think it's also, what are we doing to close those loopholes? I keep thinking back to the very frustrating curfew that the city manager instituted through a loophole, right? We were under a state of emergency for a completely different reason, and that's why it was allowed technically. But it wasn't a great idea, and we haven't yet closed that loophole and made it clear that the state of emergency that the curfew is related to must be part of that same state of emergency. So I do think that there's really an opportunity to continue iterating on the challenges. We do discover a lot of problems and loopholes with our policies. I think it's really on us to fix those so that future generations don't have to undergo the same kinds of challenges with those structures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Pat Burt, you're up next.
So the answer is yes. I believe that we've seen not only a real significant lapse in the oversight, but also a lapse in the policy setting authority of the council. And we've the last couple of years had the city manager who is far too often teeing up policy issues with almost no alternatives to the council. And I see the council members divided between those who are too willing to acquiesce to the guidance of the city manager on policy, and those who are frustrated but not quite sure how to overcome what's happening. And governing is a real skill set, and legislating is a skill set. And those are things that I think that this council needs strength on. I'll also say that this includes not just the city manager, but the city attorney and the oversight. When we had the curfew set, I led an opposition to that immediately. I thought it was perhaps unlawful, but equally important, the city attorney didn't even sign off on it. This is the biggest legal action that we've taken in a long time, and the city attorney was not a participant in setting that.
Thank you very much. And Rachel Malone, you're up next.
Also, yes, I agree. It's really important that we keep in mind our job. When we establish policies, we have to make sure that we see them through. Our job overall as council members is to improve the lives and the well-being of our constituents. So we have to be willing to be firm but respectful when giving instructions, and not afraid to ask questions, and ensure that there are clear understandings. We have to make sure that we use good communication when we're working with the staff, when we're working with city management, and make sure that there's less room for error. Also, if the options that we want aren't on the table, it's our job to put them there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now we will go on to Jocelyn. Next question.
Thank you. Our final topic again is commercial impacts. We're going to start with Greg Tanaka, followed by Templeton, Burt, Malone, and Stone. So given the 3-to-1 jobs housing imbalance that is compounding traffic congestion, housing issues, and affordability, what changes, if any, are needed to the city's existing housing limits on, what changes are needed to the existing city limits on new commercial development? Are the limits too strict? Are they too weak? Or are they just right? So we'll start with Greg Tanaka.
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, actually, right now, given we're in a COVID situation. So a lot of companies actually are starting to work from home. So certainly my company, my wife's company, a lot of companies around here still don't have employees back. And what they're finding is that productivity is about the same, sometimes even better. So a lot of companies aren't, I saw Twitter recently said that employees can live anywhere and work from anywhere. And so I think that's a trend that's going to continue. And so it's uncertain about whether that 3-to-1 job housing imbalance is going to persist after COVID. Because a lot of our workforce here in our city is tech, right? It's things you can do remotely, software. And so to me, it's a bit uncertain about whether that housing imbalance will remain once the economy recovers. But just to what Ajit said earlier, I do believe a lot of businesses in our city are hurting, and that's something to keep in mind, especially the small local businesses.
So Greg, just to follow up, so do you feel like the existing limits are just right on a course right now?
Well, I actually asked the Jonathan Late, who's our director of development or director of planning, about so how much new development has there been commercial-wise. And so if I contrast to what happened on the planning commission to what I've seen on city council, the amount of new commercial development in our city, not to say construction, but in terms of new entitlements, is way less. So I think right now we're probably doing okay. I don't think we need to have a dramatic change in restrictions at this point.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that follow-up. All right, on to Carrie Templeton.
Thank you. Yes, I think we're on track for right now. So just right, I think, in your choice list. That may change. We're definitely seeing a lot of fluctuation in terms of how the existing commercial and office space is being used, especially the large amount of vacancies. I'm hopeful that when the pandemic is over, we can get back on track pretty quickly. So given that, we need to think about what is the realistic expectation of how people will be commuting in to the work or not. And I think we have a lot of employers that are high tech, but we also have a lot of healthcare. Stanford, for example, just checked it out. They're number 4 employer here, and some of that's in-person work. You can't do that from home. So I think we're going to still see a large amount of jobs that require commuting in. So we need to think about that as well, and just not frame it as exclusively telework.
All right, thanks very much.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to Pat Burt. Are the commercial limits right now too strict, too weak, or just right?
So I think the commercial limits are right now. In 2015, I helped lead putting the first annual office cap. We were leaders in the region because Palo Alto has one of the highest jobs to housing imbalance in the country. But in addition to that, we now have the comp plan cap, and that puts us on a very restrained office growth. It still allows 50,000 plus square feet per year. What happened though on the impact fees that you asked about in late 2016, we were scheduled and approved increasing them, almost doubling them for affordable housing, because that's how we primarily pay for affordable housing. The new council majority and Councilmember Tanaka at that time voted to rescind that increase, and we have not had it back since then. On top of that, that's the commercial impact fee that Stanford uses, or as the county uses, on Stanford's development that funds affordable housing in Palo Alto like Buena Vista, and we lost that fund. So it had a double whammo when this council that was supposedly pro-housing reversed the impact fees for affordable housing.
All right, thanks for bringing up the issue of impact fees. Raven Malone is next, followed by Stone.
I think that the commercial development square footage limit is fine, but I do agree that we still have to allow for small businesses to come here. Let's not forget that sales tax is a huge source of our revenue. And I do agree with Greg also that companies may not want to build that much, especially considering, you know, we're expecting a shift from working at work to working from home. And if we are going to allow more businesses to come here, we do need to make sure that they're contributing to housing as well as parking. We have the largest housing imbalance in the Bay Area, and we're in the middle of a housing crisis. I cannot stress this enough. If we're allowing the development of more commercial businesses, then we also need to end exclusionary zoning so that we can convert some of the empty office spaces into housing units that people can live in. We need to make sure that we start being a solution to the housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Raven. And finally, Greer Stone.
You know, when we allow office development to continue, when we get more office, that means we're not getting more housing. And so because the fact when we leave it up to the market, a developer is going to get is going to choose the option that's going to give them the greatest return on their investment, which is always going to be office space, because it rents for about $12 a square foot. Luxury housing is about $4 a square foot, and affordable housing is far less. And so we need to change the market demand to make sure that it is more incentivizing for a developer to actually build housing. Our current office cap definitely could be strengthened. I mean, our annual cap in the downtown California Avenue and along El Camino is 50,000 square feet a year. But if you don't use that, it rolls over to the next year. So you could have $100,000 in 1 year. Also, council needs to get better at making sure that we are promoting policies to promote housing over office space. In 2019, the council majority, I believe including council member Tanaka, voted to repeal the downtown office cap that hadn't been in place for a very long time. And I think we could have gotten more housing in there if we hadn't done that.
All right, thank you all. That's a very big topic. I appreciate you being able to squeeze down your thoughts into 60 seconds. I know there's a whole lot more that could be said about that. So we end this second round of the 5 candidates. I thank you all for participating in that. We're going to open it up now to all 10 candidates. This is our quick fire round. This is the chance to be even pithier. We're going to ask you questions on a variety of topics that have come from our readers. We're basically looking for, within 15 seconds, we're looking for sort of a yes, no, just give voters a sense of your leaning on the topic. I'm going to hand it off to Gennady first for the first quick fire question.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn. And the order is going to be Burt, Eisenberg, Koo, Lowing, Lee, Malone, Stone, Tanaka, Templeton, Varma, which is pretty alphabetical. So we're going to start with, if Proposition 21 passes and local cities are empowered to enact rent control and stabilization measures, would you support or oppose consideration of such a measure in Palo Alto? So, Bert, go for it.
Yes, I would support it. The state proposition allows up to a 10% per year cap, and I think that in a boom period is an incredible burden on folks of 10% in consecutive years, driving them out. These are teachers and nurses and middle income people that we're losing.
Thank you very much. Rebecca Eisenberg.
Absolutely. I think probably we should go farther than that. Many of our landlords already received federal aid through the PPP and other CARES Act programs. Many of them actually won't experience any financial harm. I think we need to preserve, and protect our tenants.
Thank you. Lydia Koo.
Yes, I would. I actually co-authored a couple of colleagues' memo while I was on council during a period to protect tenants from being evicted over at the President's Hotel, as well as when we had a gap time when SB 1482 came about, and there was potential for landlords to evict tenants between the time when it was enacted and adopted to the time that it was came into being.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Lowing.
Yes, conceptually, I'm completely in support of that. I like data, so I'm going to read the report before I vote. But we don't want people being, put into a situation where we're forcing them out of town. We're trying to get more people in affordable situations into town. So that would be my answer.
Great. Stephen Lee.
As a renter myself, we absolutely need to do everything we can to protect renters. It's an essential element of the 3 Ps: protect renters, preserve housing, and produce housing. So yes.
Thank you. Ms. Raven Malone.
I'm also a renter. I support Prop 21. It's important that we update rent control standards to allow our local government to take steps they need to protect tenants. Costa-Hawkins is outdated, and our policies to protect renters need to evolve.
Thank you. Greer Stone, please.
Yes, I absolutely support it. As I said earlier, both my wife and I are teachers, we're renters. Every August when that notice comes in that our rent is being increased, we hold our breath. And I've had to pick up a second job in the past to be able to afford those rent increases. And Proposition 21 would help.
Thank you. Councilmember Tanaka.
Yeah, so during COVID, I supported evictions, protections for tenants. I think that was important. And if you look during COVID, rents have actually gone down because of the recession. If you look at that, if you step back and look at the bigger picture, there's a Stanford study that talked about if you have rent control, the incentive to actually build more housing, which is really needed, especially affordable housing in our city, is greatly depressed. Or for that matter, the incentive to actually improve the property.
Okay, thank you. Carrie Templeton.
Thank you. I think that before we would introduce the additional protections, we need to compare the benefit compared to the protections we already got with the Assembly bill earlier this year, and compare how it would affect the production of new housing. So we need to do what's right overall for Palo Altans and for Palo Alto renters.
Thank you. And Mr. Varma.
So I think that I definitely prefer housing over rent. I think that rent control is sort of in a weird way like advantages people who've been in Palo Alto for a long time. I think that the rule of the law is basically it's someone that who's lived over for 15 years. I think there's a lot of flaws with the bill that I wouldn't support.
Okay, thank you. Next question is Jocelyn's.
All right, we're going to talk about residential parking. We're going to start with Eisenberg and go alphabetically. The question is, why do we not have uniform protections of residential streets from employee and other non-resident parking for all neighborhoods? Do you think that uniformity is necessary?
Well, first of all, I think that we shouldn't have any offices, especially of big companies, in our residential neighborhoods. It's the cause of this problem. It's the city council's constant reliance on building more and more, choice to build more and more commercial development. So yes, we need RPP and we need the office space out of residential neighborhoods.
All right, Lydia Koo.
I actually believe that it is prudent to have uniformity, and actually I would prefer to see that the residential preferred parking permit program be similar to the one that College Terrace has, as well as Southgate, where it prohibits any of the permits to be sold to businesses.
All right, Ed Lowing.
Well, uniformity in terms of administration, I think is fine. I don't know if you're extending that question to uniformity with each of the neighborhoods because contextually they're a lot different. If they're near the Caltrain station on California Ave or downtown. So you do have to take context into consideration, but administratively, I think they should be uniform. And they're very much needed.
All right. I think the question origins from our reader is kind of asking about the uniformity of regulations, perhaps, for all neighborhoods. So, Stephen Lee.
As a neighborhood leader who's part of the Midtown Residents Association, I would prefer greater flexibility to tailor RPP programs to the specific needs and conditions of each neighborhood.
All right. Thank you for that pithy answer. All right. We're going with Raven Malone next.
I would also like to see flexibility. I agree with Stephen. I would like to see flexibility in an RPP program. But I do think that businesses, if they want to build here, need to provide parking solutions for their employees and customers because there's a parking problem here too.
All righty. Greer Stone, your take?
I agree with Ed as far as the different characteristics of each neighborhood. As chair of the Midtown Residents Association, what my neighborhood needs is very different than what College Terrace needs. We do need to be working towards phasing out non-residential parking permits within this community, especially to reduce the reliance on single occupancy vehicle use.
Okay, thanks very much. Councilman Tanaka.
Good question. So I was president of my neighbor association, College Terrace. So we blazed a trail for the very first residential permit program. It was successful. It's been kind of replicated throughout the city. On council and planning commission, I've helped approve a bunch of them. In terms of streamlining, we have to kind of factor in the context to each neighborhood.
All righty. Carrie Templeton.
Yes. One thing we've learned on the Planning Commission is that not all neighborhoods that get a residential parking program are happy with the results. It turns out they're not the answer to everything. So we do need to customize it. Plus, I'd be cautious about the overhead of enforcement.
All right. Thank you. Ajit Varma.
I agree with a lot of the sentiment that neighborhoods are different, they have different needs. So I think that the RPP is a valuable tool that should be customized based upon each neighborhood's needs.
All right, and rounding us out, Pat Burt.
So I think that there are trade-offs to RPP programs. Not all neighborhoods want them. And that the current program allows an opt-in for neighborhoods, and that's the appropriate balance. I do think that we don't want to allow intrusions of commercial uses in neighborhoods, which had been proposed by the council, a council member.
Okay. Thank you all for your thoughts on that topic. Handing it back to Gennady.
Yes, let's talk about the pandemic and the city's response to COVID. What additional steps, if any, should the city take to address the impacts of COVID on Palo Alto's most vulnerable businesses and residents? It's a tough one in 15 seconds, but let's give it a shot, starting with Councilwoman Koo and going alphabetically.
I think we need to take this time in order to assess how we can help by actually starting with hiring that economic specialist to come in and see where is it that we can, since a lot of the residents is actually frequenting the business and providing that business, then I think that we need to focus on community serving businesses, and that specialist should be hired as soon as possible to develop that plan.
Thank you very much. Ed Lowing?
Yeah, so I concur with that, but we need to be talking about that person so we understand what it is. It's a czar. It's somebody that really looks at the strategy long-term, not just a former retailer in a new job. And it has to be extraordinarily strategic. I get a little nervous when I see retail policy being set by 7 council members. I'd rather have an expert driving that.
Stephen Lee.
The most meaningful thing that we can do to support our small businesses is to get our numbers under control, as opposed to having to perhaps go back and do shelter in place. And that means greater enforcement and greater education of the public and our small businesses about the best and latest health orders.
Thank you. Raven Malone.
I think that we should definitely do more for small businesses. Recently, we had $500,000, and instead of doing more, we split it between 49 businesses, whereas East Palo Alto had $600,000, and they just fundraised the extra $1 million so that they could help more people. So we should do things like that.
Thank you very much. Greer Stone?
Well, say what we should not be doing. We should not be removing the ground floor retail protection ordinance that was put into place to make sure we are protecting and saving small businesses within this community. This is not going to be a short-term thing. Once we allow offices on the ground floor, they are going to be there for a very long time, and we're not going to be able to get that back. And I agree with the economic development manager too.
Thank you very much. Councilman Tanaka?
Right now, a lot of these small local businesses are on life support, so we need to help them out as quickly as possible. My professional background as a small tech CEO is basically helping these retailers do their business. And I think the work that I've done in council has earned me a bunch of endorsements from these local businesses.
Thank you very much. Carrie Templeton?
Yes, I agree with Stephen Lee about testing, and more testing. We need to get results back quickly, especially if we're going to be talking about reopening schools. I would also like to see the city remove any barriers to programs that would support those small businesses, like having events outdoors or other creative ideas. So I think that's what we can do.
Great. Ajit Varma?
So I have a long background helping small businesses. I built products at Square, Google, and WhatsApp for about 10 years now, just for small businesses. So I have a long list, but just a few things is I would make sure that places like University Avenue, California Avenue continue to be closed so that we get more foot traffic, and also reduce a lot of the friction and policies in businesses running that are in the city today.
Okay. Pat Burt?
In addition to the expanded testing, there are two other things that we really should be working on right now. One is to help the outdoor businesses begin to get ready to winterize, and the other is to assist and bring together a group to retrofit indoor HVAC systems to do air purification. The technologies are there, and they're cost effective, and it's not being done.
Thank you. And Rebecca Eisenberg?
There are companies that have been profiting from our pandemic. According to the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere, these companies include Tesla and Palantir, both based in Palo Alto. Billionaires and their companies are actually getting richer, while everyone else, like small businesses, is getting poorer right now. We need to tax Tesla and tax Palantir. And with the money from taxing these extremely profitable companies, we can create a fund to support our small businesses. Then maybe we can bring back Mayfield's and Antonio's Nut House. Thank you.
Oh, if only. Thank you. Okay, next question is Jocelyn.
All righty. We're going to turn our attention to South Palo Alto now and Cubberley. There's been a lot of talk for many years about Cubberley. What do you think is the best course of action right now, given that the school district continues to not be ready to redevelop? We'll start with Ed Lowing and move alphabetically through Ku. Ed Lowing.
Yeah, that's just a tremendous asset that we have down there, and we've been working on it for the entire time that I've been on commissions, which is almost 11 years. Worked on it again up until quite recently, and then this is another one of those non-15-second things. I think it's a wonderful asset. We should focus on the community center, the outdoors, the interaction of all the people, and keep working on it, even though right now we can't fund it. So I keep moving the ball forward.
Thanks, and I agree with you on the timing. This may not be a 15-second question, but we'll give it a shot. Stephen Lee.
We definitely need to continue to work together with the school district on developing the site. We can't go at it alone, and we need to get back on the same page with them. We need to look at how do we expand space for vital nonprofits to provide critical services. And we also need to look at how do we add housing in an additive way that addresses our housing needs.
Thank you. Raven Malone?
I agree with Stephen. We should definitely move forward with the master plan. I mean, the martial arts, performing arts, we need to bring things for the community, as well as housing, as well as mental health for the students. Thank you. That's all the time I have.
So far, it sounds like everyone wants to hang in there with the school district. Greer Stone, what do you think?
Yeah, I've always had a great frustration that South Palo Alto is so always underserved when it comes to community services. Palo Alto itself, we don't have a true community center. Coverly, we need to redevelop it, and we got to redevelop it to be a community center that's going to serve our community for decades to come.
Thank you very much. Greg Tanaka.
Well, I've been looking at Coverly for some time, back when I was on the Infrastructure Blue Ribbon Commission, the Planning Commission, and now Council. It's a tremendous asset. I think the big problem is there's a lot of uncertainty about what the need is for Coverly. So we need to be good partners with schools and the community to figure out what is the best plan for Coverly.
Follow-up question, do you think that the city should not go alone on this redevelopment then? I'm sorry, that's for Greg.
Oh, sorry. I think we should partner with our school district. They own most of the property.
Thank you. Carrie Templeton?
Yes, I think, you know, the root of this question is that there's disagreement about how and when to develop it between the city and the school board. And if we're going to move forward, we need to not start with where we differ, but where we agree. We need a place for community services and community centers and activities. And we also need to replace dilapidated buildings. So that's where I would start in going forward. Start where we agree.
Thank you. And Ajit Varma.
So I think that Coverly is such a great opportunity for us to build resources for our community. I think that we should work with the school district. They obviously own much of the land. They can't raise things like bonds and stuff in order to do development, but the city is able to do that. So it allows us to actually not only work with them, but provide them a great revenue source for them to make sure we have the best schools in Palo Alto.
All right. And Pat Bird, how do we move forward with Coverly?
The school district has made clear that they can't yet predict their needs at Coverly, and that we just don't align on the time frame. We should move forward with investing in the community center to serve the existing needs of South Palo Alto and what are these massive 10,000 additional housing units being mandated on us, and we'll have additional community service needs, and we need to invest in that.
Pat, may I ask you a follow-up question? Are you saying that the city should start redeveloping its 8 acres?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca Eisenberg.
I'm a public school parent. I have 2 children in high school. The PAUSD keeps making budget cuts, not supporting our teachers. 1 counselor for 500 students. They need money. We need housing. A good lawyer like me can work out a deal, giving the district liquidity while protecting their future needs with a contract. We should solve both our problems by working out an acquisition of as much of their land as we can. I'm confident we can do that.
And a follow-up question for you so that I understand. So you're saying that the city should be building or the housing?
I'm saying we need to sit down with the school district and work out a deal where they get money and we get land, because they need money and we need land.
Thank you very much.
And we can protect their rights while doing so.
Okay. Finally, Lydia Koo.
Yes, I think that we should move forward and start looking into developing Coverly. And the people of Palo Alto who had attended those community meetings have said they want a community center. They want a social space, not housing.
All right, back to Gennady.
Well, let's jump to Foothills Park, where apparently Carrie and Greg are hanging out. Anyway, under what conditions, if any, would you support opening up Foothills Park to non-residents? We're going to start with Stephen Lee in this round and then continue on.
The HRC voted unanimously to recommend reopening Foothills Park to non-residents, and we rarely agree on anything. You know, as Councilmember Cormack said, sharing Foothills Park won't make it any less special. And we know that the environmental impact doesn't take into consideration residency. We have the capacity to share this treasure with others.
Thank you. Raven Malone.
I fully support opening the park. We should have opened it a while ago, in my opinion. And I mean, we're neglecting other kids who live in other places whose cities weren't even well established when Foothills was open in Palo Alto.
Thank you. Greer Stone.
Yeah, I'm a social justice advocate as well as an environmentalist. I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club, and I'm confident that we will be able to find a path forward that's going to be able to open up the park while maintaining the delicate ecosystem and protecting wildlife and habitat there at the same time.
Okay, so all for opening so far. Greg Tanaka.
So we're going to be doing a pilot. It's going to be revenue neutral. We're going to look at the data and be able to figure out is there going to be an impact on the park's environment, and then the voters can decide.
Okay. Carrie Templeton.
The conditions under which the private version of Foothills Park was established were 50 something years ago, and conditions have changed a lot, especially how accessible Palo Alto is or isn't. I say we should just open it and share this beautiful park with our neighbors.
Thank you. Ajit Varma.
So I think the Foothills Park issue is probably one of the most poorly managed issues that I've seen in Palo Alto. It's turned into a reputation of us being exclusionary, us not welcoming people. So personally, I think it was this great resource for Palo Alto residents, but I think we have no choice but to open it now.
Okay. Pat Bird.
Yes, I co-signed the community leaders memo that supported the Parks and Recreation Commission moderate proposal to reopen Foothills Park. I'm up there 3 days a week. It can handle it. We should approach Los Altos and Los Altos Hills, who didn't come in initially on co-funding it, to help support us on the maintenance.
Thank you. Rebecca Eisenberg.
We have to open the park, and then we need to issue a public apology for our embarrassing, shameful decision to close it. I support the ACLU and NAACP's lawsuit against the city. As I told the city council during the meeting when they decided to put civil rights to a vote, depriving access to non-residents is a violation of the 14th Amendment of our Constitution. We have to open it.
Thank you very much. Lydia Koob.
Thank you. I want to respect our residents and all the people who made the decision prior in order to keep it for environmental preservation and for our future generations, and to leave it for them to vote on whether to open or close on the ballot in 2022.
Thank you very much. Ed Lowey.
Yeah, this has been an extraordinarily controversial issue. I think the Parks and Recs Commission did a heck of a job in thinking through this, doing their initial round of data, and came up with a very strong recommendation, which unfortunately took too long to get implemented. I think we need to support commissions when they work that hard. And now it's going to be implemented, but it's going to be late. I would like to see the pilot done immediately, maybe with volunteers instead of with money, and then get data on the basis of which council or the ballot measure could be have some data to make a decision on.
Thank you very much. Jocelyn, next question is yours.
All right, now we are going to touch the third rail, that is campaign finance. Do you support public financing of council campaigns and/or limits on campaign contributions? We'll start with Raven Malone and go alphabetically.
I do support limits to campaign funding. It's a little ridiculous the amount of money that we have to raise, especially when we're running against people who are almost in the six figures. And I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic where people are struggling financially, and yet we have to bother them for money.
All right, thank you. Stone?
Yeah, I would like to have limits. I've committed myself to not accepting any outside development money, and as a candidate in this race who's raised over $70,000, $80,000, mostly from outside interests and developers, and that should stop.
Okay, and next we have Greg Tanaka.
No, I think in terms of campaign financing, I don't think that public funding is the right thing. Our city is already struggling on our finances. We have a $40 million deficit or revenue shortfall. So that doesn't seem like the appropriate thing to use public money for. And if everyone complies to the same campaign financing, then that makes it fair.
All right, Carrie Templeton.
All right, can you hear me? My internet connection is unstable, so I think that we really do need to have some campaign finance reform in Palo Alto, and especially financing limits would be the place I would start. We're seeing this used effectively in Mountain View, which has a slightly larger population than ours, and they're able to run all their campaigns with a voluntary contribution limit of $25,000. So that's where I would start for Palo Alto.
And Ajit Varma, do you agree or disagree?
So I don't think money has a place in politics. I'd say that you don't have to raise money, you choose to raise money. I've been offered a lot of money, a lot of donations, and I've said no to all of them because I don't believe that money has a place in politics. I believe that people should win based upon their views. So to me, like, even though I could self-fund my entire campaign as well, I've chosen not to spend more than other candidates because I don't think it's fair.
Thank you very much. Pat Burt.
Yes, I think we should have campaign finance limits. In the recent years, we've had an explosion in the costs of our campaigns, principally driven by huge amounts from outside commercial developers who are paying in massive amounts of funds to a few candidates. And I think it's a real problem that our community is being, our elections are being bought out that way.
All right. Rebecca Eisenberg.
I strongly support publicly funded elections. We in Palo Alto, one of the wealthiest cities in the state, much less world, can afford to do this. Our current system that advantages the wealthiest people from the wealthiest families with the richest friends excludes a vastly large number of our population who can't afford to campaign and don't have rich friends. We need change.
Thank you. Lydia Koo, your thoughts on this topic?
I agree with Pat Byrd that we should limit, and then I would also add to limit to Palo Alto voters.
Thank you very much. Ed Lowing.
Oh, mute.
I did not favor public financing. For one reason is because in the next round, in the next cycle, we would have 20 candidates. But beyond that, I think that there should be some limits in terms of the amount. And I think there should be limits in some of the sources, potentially geography, but potentially other areas of limitations there.
Thanks, Ed. And we thought 10 candidates was a lot. Stephen Lee.
From the very beginning, I told my campaign team that we're going to live our values. And that means that we are not taking donations above $1,000. We're not taking money from developers, law enforcement, or corporations. And actually, we turned off our fundraising just this past week because we met our $45,000 fundraising cap, which is about less than the average amount spent over the last 6 years.
All right. Thank you very much. Going back to Gennady for the next question.
I'd love to see 20 candidates, but anyway, this one's a little more open-ended. Tell us about one challenge facing the city that we haven't discussed tonight and what you'd like to do about it. And we're going to start with Greer Stone and then move on to Greg Tanaka and go through the alphabet again. So go for it, Greer.
I think a more specific question on kind of like the type of police reform that our community needs would be a good question to focus on. I know I've talked a lot about making sure that we have mental health professionals responding to calls that involve mental health crises, like so many do, instead of having police officers respond to those type of calls.
Thank you. Greg Tanaka.
Well, one topic we haven't covered today is revenue sources. So we have a pretty massive drop in our transit occupancy tax for hotels and our sales tax. Our city is really hurting. We don't have the employees that come here anymore to spend money. So really figuring that out is important. I think having things that hurt the businesses is probably not a good idea right now.
Thank you very much. Carrie Templeton.
Is this where I get to nerd out about transit?
Oh,
go for it, right? I would say that we are a wonderful city, and I don't know why a city as wonderful as Palo Alto doesn't have better coverage with our transit options, especially our local free shuttle. So I want to see when we're through the pandemic, if we can figure out a way to get that on track.
Thank you very much. Ajit Varma?
So I think one of the best things about Palo Alto is the great cultural things that we have. So the Palo Alto Junior Museum and Zoo is great, the Museum of American Heritage, the Palo Alto History Museum, and a lot of these are supported by the city. So I think it's very important for the city to continue to support these great cultural and historical resources in Palo Alto.
Thank you. Pat Byrd?
Yes, so we are one of the few cities in the region that has zero business tax. Where the Silicon Valley charges less than 5% of what San Francisco does. So when we return begin to recover in the economy, we need to go back to what I was leading as a citizens group of a business tax to pay for transportation and affordable housing. These are big issues that won't go away, and we need those funds and the business to pay their fair share.
Thank you
Big
very much.
business.
Rebecca Eisenberg.
Childcare. We can't restart the economy. We can't restart our schools. We can't allow families to actually have a life, support themselves, unless we provide childcare. This has been a huge need in our city for decades, for centuries. We can afford it. Let's provide childcare.
Thank you very much. Lydia Coop.
So I agree with Pat Bird again. And also, in addition, I am a huge, and I'm very passionate about our natural resources, especially our tree canopy. So I would like to see that we protect our trees more, take care of the trees that is in South Palo Alto, and grow more trees.
Thank you. Ed Lowing.
Luckily, I had a backup there because Lydia just took mine. Tree canopy is something in a project that they say, well, we're gonna replace that, but yeah, they don't say how many decades it takes. So the one I'm going to mention quickly of my own is that homeless and RVs, that we're finally making some progress on that, which is wonderful. I've worked for the homeless with the homeless for years, and I just want to say, because in another forum I saw candidates talk about we just need more homes for them. I just want to point out that it is not that simple. The needs of those folks are very complicated. They need a lot of different social services. And if we're going to be serious about it, we got to step up using partners as well as our own city to address the variety of services that they really need.
Thank you very much. Stephen Lee.
With the recent passing of Justice Ginsburg, I think we need to get serious about addressing gender inequality in our city and in our community. Nearly 3 years ago, the HRC unanimously made a recommendation to our council to address this issue, but it's been lingering on their agenda since then. We need to get serious about it again.
Great. Raven Malone.
Muted.
Sorry. Raven, you're muted.
She's not muting. She's having a technical malfunction. We may need to switch to a different source.
All right, why don't we come back to Raven?
Yeah, let's go to Greer Stone and then we'll try Raven again right after that.
Okay.
Oh, there she is.
There you are. Raven Malone, go for it. Sorry. Okay, yeah, well, we'll come back. We'll come back.
Now?
Oh, here we go. Let's try it one more time. Go for it.
Sorry, I agree with some of the other candidates, but bicycle safety, we've had 463 crashes and 438 injuries in Palo Alto in the last 4 years. And actually one of the most dangerous places is Waverly and University, that intersection. And it's important that we do something to protect our bikers while encouraging them to take greener sources of transportation.
Thank you very much. Greer Stone.
Gennady, you didn't like my answer? I already went.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry.
It's because I didn't mention the Giants. I know that's the reason why.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Okay, we're going to move on to Jocelyn's next question.
All right, I'm going to take over. We're going to talk about cannabis. For real. Would you favor allowing one or more retail cannabis stores in the city, as Palo Alto voters supported when they approved Prop 64 in 2016? And we're starting with Greg Tanaka and going alphabetically.
Well, I think most people move to our city for the kids, and so we want to make sure we have a good, safe environment for them. I didn't support the vaping in our city as well for our youth. So I think cannabis, that's something we have to be really careful about.
Carrie Templeton.
Yes, for people who want to get access to cannabis in Palo Alto, there are other options. I'm not in favor of a dispensary right now.
Thank you very much. Very clear. Ajit Varma.
So I'm very supportive of the voters having a choice in Palo Alto. And so if this was put on the ballot and voters voted for it, I think that the views of our citizens should be respected.
All right. Pat Burt.
So I agree with Ajit. So the community supported on a statewide level. I think it is a community issue. I think that that there are places in our commercial areas, not retail, but industrial and other commercial areas, they could be sited away from any residences or schools or anything like that. So I'd be open to considering one.
Okay. Rebecca Eisenberg.
So to clarify, one of the reasons that our state voted to decriminalize marijuana was in order to ensure that people of color and other targeted individuals would no longer be arrested and thrown in prison due to racial bias and not for any violent crime. I think we need to focus on that when we talk about marijuana's legality.
And I'm sorry, to clarify, you're in favor of a dispensary in Palo Alto?
Dispensaries, well, only if Palo Alto actually would enforce and inspect, which currently, because the city council defunded our Office of Inspections and Enforcement, I don't have a lot of faith that they actually would be able to ensure that dispensaries would actually only sell to qualified adults. So,
Got it.
due to the circumstances, no.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Lydia Green.
Similar to my opposition to flavored tobacco, I would be also opposed to a dispensary for cannabis.
All right. Ed Lowing.
There's more data than now than what came out. I urged, I think I was quoted in your publication as saying it's the Wild West, and meaning that we just didn't have any data on it. But I haven't also heard of any need on it, and there's a lot of opportunities outside of the city. So I'm not sure this is a priority that's worth going for.
All right. Stephen Lee, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I agree with Ed. We have so many more higher priority items. So I'd rather us not waste our time or money exploring an issue which I don't really consider an issue in Palo Alto. Thank you.
Okay. Raven Malone.
Yes.
Are you there? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes. We're
Okay.
here.
So I think that we should bring cannabis to Palo Alto. The guidelines to owning and operating cannabis stores are very strict, and not having a dispensary here isn't keeping it out of the city. Why not make it a source of revenue, especially now during COVID? We need more sources of revenue.
Okay, thank you. And Greer Stone, source of revenue?
Yeah, I agree with what Pat Burt said as far as exploring options to be able to have dispensaries in town where it's away from schools, as long as it's being regulated properly and enforced. I'm open to that option.
All right, thank you all. Moving back to Gennady for the next question.
Hey, big pivot from marijuana to natural gas. One of our readers wants to make sure that natural gas remains available for home heating purposes. How do you respond to his ask for continued maintenance of natural gas infrastructure? And we're going to start with Carrie Templeton this time.
I don't think within our lifetimes that we'll completely phase out natural gas. So I would not worry. I would tell that reader not to worry. However, natural gas is not a very efficient way to heat your home, and it's carbon emitting, and that's a goal that we have agreed to as a city, is to reduce our carbon emissions. So we're going to try and work on that together.
Okay, I hope that's not a comment on the duration of our lifetimes, but Ajit Varma is next.
I'd also say that I think that it's going to take a long time to get off of natural gas, just because all current houses are on it, and so future buildings we can change regulations. But I think it's unwise and unsafe to say we're just going to not support our current infrastructure because eventually we won't need it.
Thank you, Pat Burt.
So I favor first that the new commercial and residential buildings be electrified. The technology has really advanced in the last 5 years, so it's become highly efficient and cost effective. Then we would be able to mandate it for commercial buildings. On residentials, for the time being, I think we work on incentives, and they're really, the heat pumps and other technologies are now really promising.
Thank you. Rebecca Eisenberg.
So we as a city need to invest in renewable energy. We need to make it more affordable for our residents to use renewable energy than it is to use natural gas. That's on the city, not on the residents. We could be providing solar panels and other forms of green energy to help our residents.
Thank you very much. Lydia Koo?
Well, the city has voted and to adopt, for the new buildings to be electrified, especially commercial as well as new homes. However, I think for the older homes, it will take some time in order for them to switch over. But more importantly, I think that we really need to ensure that the state and the counties have the infrastructure in order to sustain the electrical grid that is going to be needed. And also for emergency preparedness purposes, I think that, having the gas might be something that we might want to have the opportunity to fall back on.
Thank you very much. Ed Mallard?
Yes, on new, I agree. That's what we should be doing to lower greenhouse gases, and that's in the sustainability plan. For retrofitting, I think residents should have the choice to do that, not be forced to do it, but we should also give them some incentives to encourage them to do it. So that's where I would put that.
Thank you. Stephen Lee?
Yeah, my generation and the next are going to have to live with the consequences of our inaction on climate change. We need to move faster on full electrification. I think I actually spoke to the person who asked this question. And in that process, we need to make sure that we're not indirectly using natural gas, but we are moving to truly renewable full electric.
Thank you. Raven Malone?
I understand the want to get natural gas out of the city is dangerous, it's bad for the environment. I would like to see it phased out, not just cut and dried, no more gas, and switch to electric. I understand that this is a lengthy process, but we should at least start with an incentive programs to reward the residents for switching from gas homes to electric.
Thank you very much. Greer Stone, only going to call on you once this time.
That's okay. You can call me more. I agree with what many have said about wanting to phase out natural gas for new development. When it comes to existing natural gas in residential homes, it should be the residents' choice, but we should be offering subsidies and incentives for them to switch to electrification.
Great. And Greg Tanaka?
Yeah, climate change is one of the biggest issues. And so conversion, it makes sense. But right now we're only doing it for new properties. For existing properties, that's probably the biggest opportunity. And so I think there has to be programs in place, but also looking at there's even more efficient gas units as well that we could potentially use to reduce the impacts.
Excellent. And I'm going to hand it off to Jocelyn for what looks like probably is our last question. And thank you to the 400 participants and all the candidates who've stuck with it for almost 2 hours. Go for it, Jocelyn.
All right. I actually have one question, and then we will give you 15 seconds each to wrap up. So generous of us, huh? So the question has to do with airplane noise. What role will you play in dealing with the federal government to address airplane noise concerns both now and in the future? We will start with Ajit Varma.
So this has been a problem for a while. Like you can actually see it increased when the airplane routes changed. So I think with a lot of this, like we need to be more aggressive. There's been talk of like suing the federal government, bringing lawsuits against them in order to make a change. And I think that they will back down and change to better routes that wouldn't impact Palo Alto as much.
Thank you very much. Pat Burt.
So I would continue on the aggressive approach that Councilmember Koo has led on, which is to help form a new sub-regional group, because one city alone is not going to have an adequate voice. It's a tough battle. It has to be a combination of engaging our citizenry. We have a great group of our Sky Posse who's done a fantastic job, and we should continue moving aggressively.
Thank you. Rebecca Eisenberg.
I negotiate for a living with very difficult people. I've negotiated with many federal government agencies. I don't think we jump right to the aggressive approach. It has not worked in the last century here in Palo Alto. I think we negotiate a solution. We find out what it is that the FAA wants, and we don't give it to them unless they give us what we want, which is lack of airplane noise.
Thank you very much. Lydia Koo.
Thank you, Pat. We are working at this point with a group of residents that are trying to work with the congressionals in order to reduce the date-night level noise from the 65 decibels to even more more aggressive so that it does address the noise level.
All right. Thank you. Ed Lowing?
Yes, I think Lydia has led on this, and we need to kind of stay the course. It's really, really tough when you're dealing with the FAA, really tough. But you just got to work through those committees and stay at it and use the local representatives as well. And maybe in the new council, you'll get some help too.
Thanks for your perspective. Stephen Lee?
Yeah, I agree with Lydia and Pat on this. We need to step up our lobbying efforts with neighboring cities and the entire region, period. That's it.
All righty. Raven Malone?
Thank you. I agree with Stephen and Pat. This has been an issue here for years, and it is because of the FAA, and the mayor even signed a letter to the council on environmental quality. And it's just important that we keep working with them and we keep working with the cities as a group to go to the FAA and until we can get this fixed.
Thank you, Raven. Greer Stone?
This is a serious issue. One of my coworkers at Gunn, she and her family have lived here for decades and are considering moving out of the city because it's become so unbearable. I hear airplane noise in the middle of the night as well that keeps my wife and I up. I agree. Councilmember Koo has been doing a great job on leadership as well as Sky Posse. We need to continue to be able to help promote them and make this a top priority.
Thank you, Greer. Greg Tanaka is next.
So in March, I led a meeting with the Department of Transportation, Elaine Chow's office there, in terms of looking at what can we do about this, right? Because it's been a persistent complaint and it's a real problem, especially for our city. And one of the things that they talked about was there's a pilot in Boston, Logan, where they're spreading the flights apart so that they're not over the same route every single time. It's not as much noise. So I think pushing for that and making that pilot happen. We talked about maybe having it piloted at SFO or San Jose, but with COVID, it kind of got delayed.
Thank you very much. Finally, Carrie Templeton.
Thanks. You know, it's not just that we have airplane noise, it's that the airplane noise is every 60 to 90 seconds and they're flying too low right over our city. So here in Barron Park, when we moved here, they flew in different routes and then something happened and everything was consolidated. So we need to really understand our framing and make sure that our language conveys the urgency of this, the changes we're asking for.
All right. I'd like to invite all of you for a final closing statement. We do have about 15 seconds each, so apologies there. Tell us why we should elect you to be one of the 4 new council members, starting with Pat Burt.
So in this very challenging time, we need a council that not only has fresh ideas and vision, but has the experience and the skill set and understands how to make government work and how for the council to be effective and regain its proper role in representing the citizens of the community.
Thank you very much. Rebecca Eisenberg.
Palo Alto deserves a change. Current and previous city council members have failed us. Seniors, families, small businesses, I'll bring that change. That's why you should vote for me.
Thank you. Lydia Koo.
Residents are the core of this community, and we have invested in our neighborhoods, at our schools, and we have greatly contributed to all the civic activities that make the community healthy and cohesive while supporting our strong economy. And I have worked the last 3 years and 9 months for the residents, and I will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Lowing.
These are very tough times, and every time it's a very tough job description with everything that has to be done. I'm kind of a hybrid candidate in that I have 10 plus years in the city on commissions and a long business experience, but I'm also a quote new face. So I've got the experience, I've got a transparent track record that it means I have, you're not taking a risk. You can look at it, and people trust me. So I will get things done.
Thank you, Ed. Stephen Lee.
Yeah, if you're frustrated with where our city is heading and the lack of progress, I hope you vote for change. I hope you vote for bold, progressive, and responsive leaders. As one of only 3 candidates out of 10 endorsed by the County Democratic Party, I hope to earn your vote this coming November.
Okay. Raven Malone.
I will bring a fresh perspective, innovative ideas, and more important, I'll listen to you and your concerns. I'll bring your voices to the table and work hard to ensure that we're not still only paying lip service. And we're actually working hard to make sure that we're improving the city and doing all the changes that you need. Thank you.
Thank you, Raven. Greer Stone.
I love Palo Alto, and this city, leadership in this city really requires experience. And I have experience over the past 8 years, not only as a social justice advocate, commissioner, chair of the Midtown Residents Association, as well as a teacher. And I want to represent your voice. I don't have the time today, but please check out my website at greerstone.com. I hope to earn the honor of your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Tanaka.
I'm a good listener. I hear all perspectives, make balanced decisions. I think your paper called me the leading fiscal hawk, which is really important to have sensible spending in a time when we're going through this great recession. I have a recovery plan that we need to really cover from our economic hardships, and that's earned me over 300 endorsements, which is twice that of the next candidate.
And Carrie Templeton.
I'm running to bring the promise of Palo Alto to everyone in our community. And I think this is really important because this is a value we all share. I'm an experienced leader with leadership in City Hall and in high tech. And I'm ready to listen to our community members and our community, least heard community members and our most heard community members. I'm completely available. You can find my contact info on carrieforcouncil.com.
And finally, Ajit Varma.
I have a deep background in business and technology and coming up with new ideas. I think that we have seen a lot of challenges, and we see new challenges that we never thought possible. So I will be the person to really listen to the community and make sure that we emerge from this pandemic a stronger city.
All right, well, that wraps up our city council debate. I want to thank all 10 candidates. It's just, we're very fortunate to have so many civic-minded, caring, smart people vying to serve us on the council. So thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you for all that you're doing to campaign and to get your word out in this very challenging time of COVID. So thank you so much for being here and for all that you're doing. We really appreciate it. For those who are interested, next week on Wednesday, we'll have a school board debate at 7 o'clock. You can sign up for that at paloaltoonline.com/PAUSD. And then this debate is actually going to be on YouTube after it processes in a couple hours, and you can watch or rewatch it at your leisure. So again, thank you all. You've been tremendous tonight. I just really appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.